Hi YouTube, it's Ty, and I'm here for another review and recap of Hell's Kitchen. This time it's season 18, episode 6, and I think that this one was called Hot Potato, I'm not sure. Again though, rookies versus veterans has now turned into girls versus boys, so here we go. This episode starts off with Chef Ramsay telling everybody to fuck off like he usually does. And then back in the dorms, everyone's talking and they're surprised that Kevin is the one who got eliminated on last week's episode. And I'm a little surprised too. Kevin seemed probably the most promising of the veteran males to me. And but I'm kind of in general a little surprised to see how all of these veterans are just falling off. And it makes me wonder, and maybe that's something that we can discuss in the comment section, do these veterans, are they doing so well in their careers maybe that they don't need this competition? Are they just not hungry enough for the win? Let's just have a discussion. I'd like to know what you all think about that. And then we get a quick scene with Chris and Sanae, and he's asking her something along the lines of, is there any such thing as a perfect service? And I think that she said that like kind of the best that they can hope for is an acceptable service. And he tells her that he feels like he's losing himself in this competition, and that is kind of I guess a forewarning of some things that are going to come a little bit later in the episode. And then the theme song starts. And this is something that I had not mentioned in earlier reviews, but I love the way that the theme is this year with just Gordon Ramsay walking through the Hell's Kitchen with, the flames and the fire all going up in the background. I'm so glad that they're not doing all those corny things that they used to do with all the chefs, like, have them running from a meatball avalanche and whoa, like with their horrible acting. Like, they're not actors, they're chefs. So I'm really glad to see how they did the theme song this year. So we get to the challenge, and Hell's Kitchen is always just so extra. Chef Ramsay comes out and he tells the chefs that they're about to meet a legend with a brand that is known around the world, and out comes Mr. Potato Head on a silver platter. And so the challenge for today is for the chefs to make a potato dish, and then down drops all these ingredients from the ceilings because it looks like they're only going to have a few little like slim pickings that are on the floor. Y'all, honestly though, when I saw that Mr. Potato Head, all that I could think about was Jen on her last episode during their challenge when she was working the potato station. Or no. Actually, it was Heather working the potato station. Jen was working salads. And then Heather came over to help her, and she said, and here comes Jen with her big potato head ass. That's all that I can think of. Shout out to Jen. Did I say Jen? Yeah, she said, here comes Heather with her big potato head ass. So anyway, shout out to Jen. I still hate that she's gone. I still miss her. So the chefs prepare all of their dishes, and the blue team has one more chef than does the red team. So we know the drill. Chef Ramsay tells them to all decide which is the weakest dish and to eliminate that one from the challenge. And everyone seems to go with T's dish at first. They're saying that the presentation is just off, but T sticks up for her dish and says her sweet potatoes are supposed to look lumpy, basically, or something along those lines. Then they decided on Kanae. We'll eliminate her dish. And y'all, they never, when they have to do this, they never eliminate the correct dish, do they? I mean, season after season after season, I swear, it's like whenever this is a thing that comes up, they always end up eliminating one of the best dishes that can help them win the challenge, and that team ends up losing. That team that has to eliminate a dish. Chef Richard Blais is the chef who's coming to help judge this challenge, and he is from Atlanta, really hot chef there, and that immediately gets Gizzy and Scottley very excited. We know that they're the two chefs from Atlanta who knew each other before the competition, and so then they just immediately jump right into the dishes after we make that introduction. The judges are judging on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being best. Jose goes first and gets a 2 from both chefs, which did not seem impressive at all. But then T was like, "You think that's slow? Hold my beer, Jose." And she ends up getting 1 point from Chef Blais and 2 points from Chef Ramsay, who told her that her potatoes were actually the least appealing thing on her plate. And of course, we know in this challenge the potato is supposed to be the star of the dish, so that's not so good. Then Trevor and Heather tie with 6 points apiece. And by the way, Trevor is the only contestant in Hell's Kitchen who hasn't been able to leave for a prize win. No matter how the teams have been mixed up, he has lost every challenge and has had to do every single punishment to this point. Then Chris put up his lobster pie and he got the first perfect score of the challenge, and Ariel came close though with a 9. Then Motto came with his take on a shepherd's pie, and he had some weird explanation about how this shepherd's pie would be like if the king had his own personal shepherd, some weird shit. And Chef Blais is like, yeah, but that's not a thing. So, like, he was not impressed at all, and was equally unimpressed with Motto's dish. And I believe that both chefs gave Motto a 1 out of 5. And then here comes the challenge queen, Mia, and she got the second perfect score of the challenge with her Peruvian potato dish that is served cold. And then the Atlanta chefs go head to head with Scott Lee beating out Gizzy 8-3. 3 Gizzy, another very low score for the women. Then Brett beats out Roe with another perfect score for the men's team, his gnocchi dish. And here, he's all straight up gnocchi, 10 out of 10, you dig? And it's just like, I don't know what comes over these Hell's Kitchen chefs that makes them get so gangster when it comes to talking about their food. And that's been, I think, like kind of since season 1, 2. Like I burn, you know what I'm saying? I cut the potatoes, you heard, and then I fry them up. You feel me? Like it's like, okay, like it's just potatoes. Like, okay, we all gotta eat, but chill out. And anyway, scored Roe though. Her score was high enough to bring the challenge to a tie, so she didn't do poorly. I think she got maybe 9. I think she got 9. So anyway, she brought the score 40-40. So the chefs had to, Chef Ramsay and Chef Blais had to figure out a tiebreaker between among all of the dishes that got perfect scores, and those were Chris's dish, Mia's dish, and Brett's dish. And Chris's dish won, and he could not believe that he heard his own name called, and Trevor could not believe that he was finally getting the hell out of Hell's Kitchen. But we have one more chef that whose dish we haven't tasted on the women's blue team. So just for shits and giggles, Chef Ramsay calls up Kanae to have her dish tasted by Chef Blais, and he says that he would have given her dish a 4. And Chef Ramsay agrees, so she would have gotten an 8, and that definitely would have been enough points for the women to win and not need this tiebreaker. So basically, eat shit T and eat shit Gizzy, and they definitely had their eat shit faces on. And in her green screen, T is like, whatever, I don't have time to think about that. Shut the fuck up, T. You're not as hot as you thought you were. Actually, you're not as hot as I thought you were either. I thought that you kind of had this thing on lock. And you either, Gizzy, which I didn't think that Gizzy was that hot to begin with, but I really just thought that T had it going on. So the prize, the guys get to go on some exotic animal excursion where they get to feed the animals, and they get treated to some upscale comfort food. Looks like there was a food truck there. And the punishment, the girls basically have to prep every potato in the state of California for tonight's steak night at Hell's Kitchen. But before the girls get started on their punishment, Kanae had to say her piece, and I don't blame her. I would have too. And she didn't go too hard or anything. She basically just said, well, I guess you can't always go by looks, T and Gizzy. So the guys get to pet some ugly ass animals and feed them, and eat some burgers. Nothing too special, but it's definitely better than what the girls are doing back at Hell's Kitchen, which is peeling and slicing bin after bin after bin after bin of potatoes directly in front of Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, who are looking on. So before dinner service even gets started, Chris pulls Christina to the side to tell her that he is battling some demons and his head isn't in the game right now. He knows that he's not going to be able to give this service his all, so he's got to leave Hell's Kitchen. And she's like, tonight? Basically, he's like, yeah. So she told him to hang out, let her go and get Chef and tell Chef Ramsay, tell him what's going on. And Chef Ramsay came down there and, before that happened though, Jose saw that something was going on when he was in the kitchen and he saw Chris walk off with Christina. So he tried to take his nosy ass into the, I guess, like supply closet or room where they were talking. And Christina immediately just shut the door in his face and told him to stay the fuck out. And anyway, so then Chris told her what he had to tell her. She let Chef Ramsay know, and Chef Ramsay came down and talked to him and told him that his health is more important, so he will help him get some mental help and get sorted away. And I'll be honest, I did shed a couple of tears in that scene. I was very glad to see Chef Ramsay exhibit some passion, some compassion for him at that time, and didn't just send him home, which would have not been bad, but that he, went that extra step to say, I'll get you the help you need. Like, that made me feel good. Before service starts, Chef Ramsay announces to both teams that Chris has left the competition for personal reasons, and everyone, or most everyone, seems a little distraught about it, especially his teammates. And so the guys on the red team decide that they are going to cook their asses off in honor of Chris tonight. And then service gets started, and Mia and Jose are on appetizers, and they, get their kitchens off to a darn near flawless start. Mia was able to fly solo, and Jose got a little bit of coaching from Chef Ramsay about not moving his pans while he's preparing food. And correct me if I'm wrong though, I think that Jose was also the one who was cooking with his pan like in the air, like up here staring when he was doing risotto earlier at the beginning of the season. And so I guess if he just learns to leave his pans still on the stove, his food will actually get cooked all the way through. So good for him to know that. And how about the celebrities who were in Hell's Kitchen on this episode? I promise you, I did not know who any of those people were. I didn't even know their names that were put on the screen. And that doesn't mean that they're not popular, but usually when I watch Hell's Kitchen and they have celebrities in there, I've heard of at least one of them, if not, can look at them and recognize a face. But I thought that one of the diners was the actor who played Kato on Underground. Alano Miller. I had to look up his name before I recorded this review, and I didn't see anything that said that, like, where, he was tagged in Hell's Kitchen, but I really thought that that was him, and maybe even his wife, who's beautiful, DeWanda Wise, I think is her name. But maybe it was just a non-celebrity, but that really looked like him, and they kept showing the camera on him, and they were like actually showing the things that he was saying or that people at his table were saying. So I think that was him. And I don't know why they wouldn't just put his name on the screen. And, Alana Miller actor, like, I didn't know who there was a singer and another actor. I don't know, didn't know who they were. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The first problem in the kitchens is on the blue side, and it's Kanae. She improperly cooked some fish, branzino, and that got entrees off to a bad start, but she did quickly correct it, and that, I believe, was her only mistake of the night. This whole let's do it for Chris thing seems to be paying off in the red kitchen, and they are looking pretty good in there, and Chef Ramsay pulls Mato to the pass and tells him to, he gets him to read the ticket for the next order, then he tells him to go and call it out to his kitchen, and he gets flustered and nervous, and he starts off right, and then he just like loses it. And I think that it was just because Chef Ramsay was right there, because he basically like kind of like grabbed him like here. Well, I went like by the side and like, hey, and he's like moving him around. So I think that like just that energy made him a little bit nervous. But the second time, he pulls it together and calls out the ticket correctly. So go Mato, good for him. I guess Chef wants to be sure that Mato has a voice. Then the next problem is in the blue kitchen, and this time it's on T and Heather, and they are putting up undercooked steak left and right. It's either undercooked or raw, and T is acting like a big fucking baby, which is so disappointing because I was kind of pulling for her. I've been asking you all, who do y'all think is going to win? Who did you like to see win? And I think that T was probably in my top 2. The first problem in the red kitchen seems to be Scott Lee and his Branzino as well, just like Kane. But it seems that problem, even though it looks like Scott Lee's problem right now, it did not start with Scott Lee, but rather whoever scored the fish, which is what Chef Ramsay asked. And so Scott Lee let him know that Trevor scored the fish. And Trevor is upset that his name got called out for what he actually did. Go figure. And he says that Scott Lee should have had his back because he's got Scott Lee's back. The fuck? Like, no, that's not how this works, Trevor. If you did something incorrectly, then you speak up yourself and just say, hey, Chef, that was me. I scored that fish. My bad. You don't wait for someone to take the blame for you, because what if that red kitchen had crashed that night later on, and then Chef is like, he would have been probably wanting to hear from Scott Lee, well, hey, you know what I mean? Like, no, Trevor, like, we got to cover our own asses and we got to own up to our own mistakes. That was not Scott Lee's, that was not his position to have to lie for you because you screwed up on scoring that fish. And in the blue kitchen, the blue team is still struggling with meat. T is breaking down even more and being an even bigger, bucking, whiny baby. And at this point, she won't even talk to Heather. She's barely talking to anybody else in the kitchen. And Heather said that she's being a bitch. And I fully agree. Even if you don't feel like talking to your station helper, or I don't know if that's considered, but the other person on your station, you gotta do it. If you're mad, then just talk like you're mad. Talk like you're angry. Put this meat in the oven, bitch. 60 seconds to the pass, bitch. Add that if that makes you, but whatever you do, don't break down completely and shut down and stop communicating. Like, T, like, that's a rookie mistake. So finally, T walks up the last incorrectly cooked piece of meat, and Chef Ramsay looks like he is doubled over in pain and getting ready to cry. He just throws the blue team out of the kitchen and tells them to pick 2 for elimination. And whoever one of those celebrities was, whom I did not know, he was quite concerned that he might not be able to have dessert because the girls got kicked out of the kitchen. Like, literally, he was kind of like, he saw them get kicked out and, oh, they got kicked out? So what that mean? We're not going to be able to have dessert? Like, okay, dude, so other things going on. So anyway, back in the kitchen, it looks like everything is going like swimmingly perfectly in the red kitchen. Everything's just going great. Chef Ramsay asks who's cooking meat, and we see that that's Trevor. And Trevor is a little bit too excited, in my opinion, frankly, to be a veteran, that he cooked his meat well. Like, okay, Trevor, it's only been, a year and a half for you, or, a season and a half for you in Hell's Kitchen, and you finally got your meat right. Like, great. He's like, yeah, it's like, okay, come on, Trevor. Like, your bar should be set a little bit higher as a veteran. In the dorms, the blue team is deliberating on elimination choices, and I believe that it was Ariel who decided to call out Kane first for the fish station going down, And but apparently the station didn't go down. I guess from the way that it was worded, that one fish that we saw come back was the only one that went back. And so then Kane kicks it to the meat station, which is really where the problem was from everything that we saw, unless some editing like left out a whole lot of other things. But that's definitely what got them kicked out of the kitchen. And so after a couple of minutes of Heather and T going back and forth, throwing blame on each other, the decision was made to put both of those two on the chopping block for elimination. So we get to the elimination, and basically Chef Ramsay was asking both Heather and T, after we see that they're the two, which one or why one thinks that they are a better chef than the other. And Heather says that T acts like her 5-year-old son when he doesn't get something that he wants at the toy store. Now, I don't know Heather's son, but I would say that's probably a fair assessment as to how T was acting that night. And T said that she had to think for herself and for Heather, and so she made an executive decision that Heather wouldn't touch any meat anymore, that T herself would be the only one who handled meat. So we saw T got eliminated, and she said that she didn't think it was fair. Now, I will say that I do think that she is better than a lot of the chefs who were left behind. But if you're only as good as your last performance, then she is definitely the one who needed to leave on that day. She was horrible in the challenge. She was horrible at dinner service, and her overall attitude was just stanky. Brett was commenting and says that he would have bet his life that T would have been one of the last two standing with her handle on that door. And he can't believe now that both T and Kevin are gone, which to him means that nobody's safe, nobody. And I was kind of thinking the same thing too. 2 runners-up are gone, and another runner-up was in the bottom 2, just within, the span of 2 dinner services. So it's not looking really good for these veterans, y'all. And lastly, what do you all think about this extra-ass preview for next week? We all know that Hell's Kitchen is good for having previews that are way more dramatic than the actual episodes, but it looks like maybe Scotty and Trevor are going to get into it, and looks like Brett is practicing some kung fu moves and doing push-ups so that he can jump in and help his homeboy. Who knows what the hell is going to happen with that? Tell me if you got any predictions about that whole storyline. Looks like there might be a fight that startled the girls, whatever. Anyway, that's it for this week. So tell me what y'all thought about this episode. Let's get a conversation going in the comments, please. I'd love it. And anything else you want to talk about in general? Who do you think is going to get eliminated next? Who's hot? Who's not? Who's your favorite? Who are you ready to see go home? Will a veteran or a rookie win this competition? Tell me what you think. Let's talk about it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Ty. This is the Test It With Ty channel, where I talk about the things that I'm testing and the things that are testing me. And that was the review for Hell's Kitchen, Season 18, Episode 6, review and recap. Mostly recap, but recap with a few comments. I appreciate you for sticking with me and for tuning in. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.